Hey everyone, so this is part 2 of Lab 4.2, which is you talking to me, and we've already built, as you can see, the noun phrase and the prepositional phrase for our sentence. The next part of what we got to do here is basically construct both a verb phrase and a sentence as well. So the verb phrase is pretty easy. Again, we're just going to build on what we've been doing. So what I'm actually going to do to help build the verb phrase is go ahead and copy this noun phrase block right here, snap it to the bottom, get rid of what was below it, and then go ahead and switch this. As you can see, I've created the variable verb phrase over here already, and I'm going to take out, I believe this last one I don't want. Instead, I want to snap in the prepositional phrase right here. So I'm going to snap in prepositional phrase, and what we have in the verb phrase is both adverb and verb before it. So we're going to take out articles and adjectives. So I'm going to snap in adverb in the first part and verbs in the second part. So now I'm not going to test it just because, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. We're going to see once we create the sentence if it truly does work. But the next part is to actually build that full sentence. So again, I'm going to take the set block right there. I know I need a join as well, so I'm just going to pull it out now. I'm going to say close, close. So you can see I've already created the sentence variable right here. And I'm going to set it to join, and I'm going to join two things, one of which is going to be the noun phrase and the verb phrase. So I'm going to go to my variables, go ahead and drag noun phrase out here, and go ahead and click verb phrase as well. Now if we say sentence, as we see we already have the say block set up, and I click, a yellow ball cautiously ate under a yellow ball. Now the one thing you'll notice is it uses yellow ball twice. That is because in my noun phrase I create what the noun is, and then in my verb phrase I use the prepositional phrase, which refers to the noun phrase that I've already sort of created. So again, it's a little bit circular for the instruction we have here. If you wanted to create something a little bit more nonsensical, you would probably just do a separate noun phrase that would be like noun phrase number 2 or like verb phrase number 2, and you'd use that instead so that that sentence made a little bit more sense. Now, for the sake of the instruction, this is going to work, but basically the sort of end part of all this is that we want to be able to do this automatically. Now, again, we already know a lot about control from the previous instructions that we've done. I'm going to go ahead and say when space key is pressed, and now you can see anytime I press the space key right here on my keyboard, we create a new sentence. And so that's all well and good, but there is a second part to this lab, and that second part is basically making it so that we can add different parts of speech to our list. So this is actually pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and drag out this when space key is pressed and change it to V for verb. Each part of this is basically we're going to say, hey, when this key is pressed, we want to add a word, which we're going to ask the user to type into each one of these lists right here. So I'm going to do two things real quick. Obviously, I can't change this list right here on the fly as the code is going. So I want to see what my verbs are. I'm going to click sentences, I'm going to click verbs right there. And now if we click this little symbol down here, we can see everything we have in our verbs list. So we want to find a particular block in order to add something, which is going to be as soon as I find it, add thing to blank. So we're going to add thing to blank. Now what we add is going to be user input. Of course, if you guys have been paying attention in the other videos we've been doing, you know that we use our ask block right here. And then we use our answer variable to store that. So we're going to add answer, and then we know this double block sign, this equal sign, variable sign right here is referring to a list. So I'm going to go and we're going to add answer to V is for verb. So we're going to click verbs right here. And now we are going to add basically whatever the user wants. So we're going to go ahead and give the prompt. What verb would you like to add? And we're going to add that answer to verb. So I'm going to go ahead and click V. It's going to say what verb would you like to add. I'm going to put in ran, R-A-N. And you can see now right there on verbs right here that ran has now been added. And the whole point of that is now we can basically expand our vocab, or we can allow the user to modify these sentences, because as much fun as it is to have these auto-generated sentences, they're kind of limited if we only do, just a preset list, right? So the rest of the script is so that basically if we want to do that, we can add it, and we can do additional things, like we can do the J key for adjectives, D key for adverbs. I'm going to skip through that because it's just an iteration of what we've already created right here, except putting that answer into a different list. And instead, I'm going to skip forward to part 3 of this, which is write a script so that when the X key is pressed, so I'm going to duplicate right here. I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to change this to X. We ask the user for one of the parts of speech and then for a number. So I'm going to say, this one gets a little bit tricky because you need to be able to store this. So I'm going to make a variable, and you'll see why I'm doing this in just a second, but I'm going to make a variable to store which part of speech that the user wants to delete. So part of speech, I'm going to make it very literal, and got to remember how to spell speech, of course. So I'm going to drag that out right here. And then we're going to say, ask the user, what part of speech do you, let's be very descriptive, want a word deleted from, and wait. And then we're going to store, we're going to say operators. We're going to say, actually it would be variables. We're going to use set. I'm going to set my part of speech, so actually I don't even need that right there. Part of speech to answer, and then we're going to say after that we're going to ask the user again something. So I'm going to duplicate all this, and we're going to say what item number do you want deleted from the list? And if I could backspace properly, I'm going to put a question mark right there, and then we're going to set, and we're actually just going to do just a quick variable, which we're going to call I for index. We're going to say set, instead of part of speech, I to answer. So now what we're going to do is set up basically, and actually let's see if we can do this a little bit simpler, because I was going to use a if then statement, but I think we can do something much easier right here. So we can say delete one of blank, but you know what? We will need an if statement, because we need to be able to assign. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to make this we're going to make our lives a lot easier. So we're going to delete one of blank of part of speech, and we're going to delete, and we're going to set, instead of one, we're going to say variables. We're going to go up to I. We're going to slot that right there. So it's going to delete I of part of speech. So now when the X key is pressed, it's going to say what part of speech do you want a word deleted from. Now this requires that the user knows their options a little specifically. We're going to act like that's the case, and we're going to go ahead and delete. I'm aiming on deleting fly from my list of verbs. So if I press X, you can see what part of the speech do you want a word deleted from, and I'm going to say verbs. Oh, I'm going to make sure I don't use X. I'm going to press enter. What item number do we want deleted from the list? We want item number 3, which is fly, deleted from the list. And press enter. You can say we're expecting a list but getting text. I want to use not part of speech. Delete. Okay, so this last part is basically when we press the X key, we want to say what part of speech do we want a word deleted from, and set part of speech that I answer. We're going to then use that part of speech variable in just a second to basically pick which list we're working on, and then we're going to say set I to answer. So to do this, I'm going to do it, I don't think, in the best way. I'm thinking there's got to be a better way to do this, but this is sort of the way that I think makes the most sense for this video right now. We're basically going to, depending on what the user's entered, we're going to delete a part of speech. So we're going to say if, and we're going to use our part of speech variable that we just created. So I'm going to use that part of speech if part of speech equals something else, and if part of speech equals this last part, we're basically going to delete I. So actually, let me duplicate this. You can see I'm just planning for 3 parts of speech right here. Obviously, we do have 6 lists, so you're going to want to account for that in yours. But we're going to say verbs for the first one. If it's equal to verbs, we're going to delete I of verbs. So I'm going to duplicate that right there. And then finally, I'm going to also do nouns as well. I'm sorry, we actually don't want verbs right there. I'm going to do nouns, and then I'm going to do, let's say, adverb as well. So for part of speech nouns, we're just going to do the actual name of nouns. And then for part of speech of adverb, we're going to do the same. And so now we're going to go ahead and try it out. Again, we want to delete fly from our list of verbs. So we press X. It says what part of speech do we want to delete a word from. And we're going to say verbs. And then we press enter. It's going to say what item number do we want deleted from the list. I'm going to click 3. And you can see his fly is now no longer part of the list. So this allows us to have such a bigger range and allow the user to really create their own randomized sentences so that, again, if someone's using our code that maybe doesn't know how to access these lists and doesn't want to break open the code, they can generate their own randomized sentences based on items that they've entered into the list. So that is how you do the full Lab 4.2. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to, you need to kind of demo a full version of the project, please let me know. Thank you very much.